My name is Ohalfi Mampane, and I'm consul at the South African Consulate General in New York. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Following discussions that we had with our aid section at the consulate, we thought it prudent to make sure that before exhibitors come into the US to showcase their products, we make sure that they comply with a number of regulations that are required so that they don't experience any challenges. But more importantly, to make sure that we prepare our exhibitors for the market and the shows that they will be participating at. Fortunately, a similar approach had been adopted already last year with Leo. Thank you so much, Leo. And through Bing, we also managed to approach Leo again this year and ask for a similar format this year, to give the exhibitors a platform to ask the necessary questions, to interrogate the practices that are required for them to actively participate in the American market and ensure that their products are received within the market. And following those discussions, also with costs, we now have on board US import agents, and that is the purpose of our webinar today, to just give you a platform to ask the questions that you need to ask, so that you're better prepared for the show that is coming up in June, hopefully when the pandemic has been dealt with. So just allow me to thank James, Leonardo, and Bill, who will be assisting us today. Cos, also thank you very much for setting this up on your side. Bing, thank you very, very much for assisting. If there are any questions and answers, Bill and Leo will be responsible for that, but I think James will be leading us this morning. Thank you so much, James, and we look forward to working with you with the consulate.
Thank you very much, Alfie. Much appreciated. Okay, Dr. Golden Mahovy, can you please take it away? You should be able to speak and everyone should be able to hear you.
Hi, James.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Firstly, I want to say thank you to the US government that funds us as the Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. And our mandate really is to promote economic growth within the Southern Africa region. And we do that through three principal objectives. The first one being supporting companies from 7 countries in Southern Africa to export into South Africa. South Africa being the largest economy in the region, a number of the raw materials that manufacturers require in South Africa are sourced from the region. And secondly, to support exporters from the 7 countries plus South Africa to export into the US under the AGOA facility. And this is where we work very closely with the South African Consulate in New York and players like yourselves, James. And thirdly, we also support the movement of investment from South Africa to the rest of the region to encourage the growth of companies and resultantly improve their performance and capacity to export. So this webinar is quite timely for us in the sense that it equips the companies that we work with to prepare to export to the US. As we are looking to the Summer Fence Food Show coming up in June, we don't know if it would go ahead, but the information shared on this webinar is important nonetheless. And someone once asked the question, do you think the world will ever go back to normal? Well, we should consider where we are now to be normal and start innovating in terms of how do we undertake exports from the region, Southern Africa, into the US under the current circumstances. So this webinar is timely in that regard in terms of sharpening our thinking. So thank you very much for organizing this. Without much ado, let me let you get on with the show.
Many thanks for that, Golden. I do appreciate that. Okay, so we will get started now. We have got 2 presentations for you, one from myself and one from Bill Senior. I'll introduce Bill shortly at the end of this first section of the presentation. So as I mentioned before, there is a chat box. Please ask any questions in the chat box and we will answer those at the end during the Q&A. So that will give me the opportunity to look through those questions and open up that to the panelists which might include costs, Golden and myself and Bill and Leonardo. So let's press on through the presentation. So thank you very much to the South African Consulate and from USAID and the Southern Trade and Investment Hub for making this happen. Obviously, without the connections there, we would not be able to do this presentation. Let's move on to the first point. So US import agent are FSVP agents. And before I dive too much into what that means, I want to just talk briefly about FSMA, or FSMA, as they call it in the US, which stands for the Food Safety Modernization Act, and FSVP, which is a part of FSMA, which is the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. Well, FSMA or FSMA is the biggest shake-up in food safety legislation in the United States in well over 70 years. And its purpose is to ensure that food is safe. And, you know, as we look around us today with coronavirus, ultimately coronavirus was a food hygiene issue in a live food market in Wuhan, China. And we only need to think about the impact that has had on global trade to get some understanding of the importance of food hygiene and food safety on all kinds of levels, which might be anything from highly localized to you know, a whole country. South Africa recently really saw that for real itself with the listeria outbreak a couple of years back. And you know, I think it was over 300 people died during that food poisoning outbreak. So food safety is really important. And the US government put a FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act, in place to protect US citizens from food that could do damage to consumers. So FSVP is the foreign supplier part of that. And what that ensures is that any foreign suppliers who are supplying food products into the US market do so to at least the same food safety standards that American businesses are expected to implement as well. So I hope that gives you a bit of the background. So looking at FSVP, which is what we are focusing on here, what is FSVP? So the definition of an FSVP importer is the US owner or consignee of a food offered for import into the United States. So if you have a customer who buys your product and imports into the United States, they are the FSVP importer. And this is important because what this legislation does is it makes the importer legally responsible for the safety of that food product. Why is that the case? It's the case quite simply because FDA, who enforce all of this, need to have someone that they can liaise with, talk with, and even, you know, punish, prosecute if need be for the safety of those food products. So the responsibility is on the FSVP importer. Now, if there is no importer, for example, you're taking product to a trade show, you are selling product on Amazon, and so on, then you need to have the services of an FSVP agent to help with this work. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But the most important thing about what an FSVP agent does is that, well, the starting point for that anyway, is that there must be a signed statement of consent between, for example, US import agent and the foreign supplier who is going to be assessed against US food safety standards. Okay, so this is a key part of the FDA final rule, and I wanted to make the point that this is all about the legal responsibility for food safety of products which are imported into the United States. So someone has to be responsible. So an FSVP agent, what they deliver is firstly the legal responsibility for FSVP compliance. So they take on the role of the FSVP importer, and that is legally executed through the statement of consent, which I mentioned before. So some of the things that are required here is that we need to make sure that the foreign food company is legally compliant. In other words, they need to be registered with FDA. We need to also carry out a food safety assessment on the product to make sure that we've identified all of the things that could go wrong and that those hazards are being controlled adequately by either the foreign supplier or by a customer in the United States after they've imported. So the controls themselves can take place anywhere in the supply chain. The labeling assessment is another area where we need to ensure that the labels themselves that are on the product are legally compliant for the US market. And any one of these things can really cause problems. It can stop your consignment. It can be detained. You could end up with an import ban on your products, an import refusal, and it could then be very difficult to trade in future in the US unless you have that expunged from the record, so to speak. So other things that an agent does are prior notice consignment checks. So in terms of FSVP, we are required not only to do the assessment of the product and also the labeling assessment, but each time product is brought into the United States, we need to check that the supplier is still compliant, that the products are not on an import refusal list, and that the company is not on an import refusal list, and that there are no safety concerns about that particular product coming into the United States. So these are usually fairly quick checks to do. We've got software for doing that, which links into FDA and other sources in terms of that kind of thing. But these are all part of the overall package of ensuring that your product is legally compliant in the United States and that it won't have any problems getting past customs with FDA putting a detention on your product. So another part of what an FSVP agent does is they deal with FDA on behalf of the foreign supplier, or indeed the US importer if we're acting on their behalf. That happens when there are detentions, import refusals, or when FDA simply wants to inspect our FSVP records about the foreign suppliers that we work with. And that happens fairly regularly. So they need to check that we are doing our job properly. So there's a lot of work involved with being an FSVP agent, but the key thing is that it protects your business, it protects your product, and it makes sure that things go as smoothly as possible for you within the United States and that you're legally compliant. So those are the big takeaways there. So why is it better to have an FSVP agent as opposed to having lots of distributors, lots of customers? Well, on the left of this visual here, what you can see is if you have a foreign supplier or manufacturer abroad, etc., who has got 4 or 5 different customers, then what happens is that customer has to do an assessment each time. So if you've got a middleman there, for example, an importer who's supplying to multiple customers, they would need to assess each of the materials, the food materials that they are buying from each source. So there's a lot of duplication of effort that goes on when you've got multiple people involved. And in reality, many of these companies either don't want to do it because it's not their expertise, or they do it maybe quite not as good because they don't have food safety expertise in-house, especially with the smaller importers. The FSVP agent eliminates that duplication by having one point of contact. You can still deal with the importers and your customers directly for the trade aspects, but for the safety aspect, an FSVP agent can really help with just streamlining all of that and provide a single point of contact both for your customer, the FDA, and for you. How do we do that? We have a cloud FSVP monitoring solution which allows us to efficiently gather information and provide that, crucially, to provide that to FDA electronically within moments of being requested it. The FDA does have a 24-hour rule that you need to be able to provide any information they ask for within 24 hours. So the real-time supplier compliance dashboard we have, plus the other tools to monitor any supplier issues, is very, very useful because it helps us in identifying hazards, identifying areas of concern before you ship product, and making sure that we can demonstrate to FDA that we know what we're doing and can prove it. So the process, how does that work? Generally speaking, most other FSVP agents will ask you for a whole bunch of documentation. You'll email that back and forth, and very quickly everyone will lose track on what's what with it. Have they got the right version? Is this the latest version? And so on. So the advantage of the way that we do this is that we have a single electronic questionnaire that we send, you fill that in online in your web browser in your office, upload all the documents we've asked for. We then have qualified individuals. I'll speak about that more in a moment. But we have qualified individuals who will assess that information and then approve the supplier. So this process can be done much more quickly, much more effectively, and it can be done at a far lower cost because of the fact that we're digitizing everything, and we've got a very clear process about how we do the assessments. So all of that's fine and well, but for you, the exporter's journey is what we really need to think about. So all along your journey, you've started with product development, you've got involved in branding and design, you've thought about your route to market, and now you're going to go to the fancy food show. That is if coronavirus hadn't happened. So now we're looking at a different world. And, you know, at the end of the day, only those who innovate and only those who think differently are going to come out of the end of this global crisis that we are in with a better business than they had when they started. So understanding the market, understanding the sales and marketing part, and now we have a situation where, you know, this market awareness opportunity is at great risk, and you know that potentially affects your plans for doing business in the United States. So one of the things that we're really looking at now is the opportunity to take some of this online. So we'll be announcing more about this later, but you know, I think everyone's scrambling to really understand what the opportunities are to be able to get through this difficult time. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to start with taking supplier profiles, putting them online, and then being able to have that as an online promotional place, more than a website. You know, more like a supplier showcase where suppliers have been assessed by us, so we know intimately about your business and your products, and taking it a stage further to help with getting exposure within the United States. So this is something we are actively looking at, because the hard part of all of this is getting customers to buy your product. And you can't do that if they don't know about you and your business, and they haven't established a relationship. So we are working very hard at the moment to work through a new interactive supplier profile, and I'm in touch with one or two of you about that opportunity at the moment. But if you are interested in that, please do let me know later, and we can hook up separately on that. So the key message I think I have here for you is that, you know, partners in all of this are critical, whether it's to do with FSVP or permits, import permits for certain products, labeling, you know, making sure you get paid on time on the compliance side, and then of course your logistics, storage, distribution, sales, and marketing, and so on. So as these multiple moving parts increase, the risk increases as well. So having trusted partners are essential, and we're open to helping all of the Southern Africa companies to to get to market. And if we can help in any way, please do let us know and connect you with the necessary people. So I started with talking about an FSVP agent earlier, and there are really only two scenarios when you need an FSVP agent. One of them is where you are a US-based importer and you don't want to have the legal responsibility for FSVP. You would appoint an FSVP agent. The other option is where are a foreign food company and wanting to export to the United States, but you don't have an importer, or you don't have anyone who's willing to do that assessment, or maybe whoever you have is very expensive, and you want to look at your options around that. Both cases, the FSVP agent takes on legal responsibility. So a few of the points, I put the slide in really to show you what the life cycle of FSVP looks like. And this is the way that we do things. If there are a lot of shipments involved across a year, then one of the things we do, because the FSVP assessment is actually valid for 3 years, one of the things we do is we have a contract which allows you to spread the cost of all of that across the 3 years. But there has to be a decent number of shipments involved. So if you only have 1 or 2 shipments per year, it doesn't really work out financially good for you, and the risk for us is pretty high. So the contract part may or may not be part of the FSVP setup. The key point then is that FDA registration needs to happen. You cannot import into the United States unless, as a food business, unless you are registered with FDA. And for that to happen, if you're going to use an FSVP agent, you need a statement of consent. After these things are in place, and you may already have FDA registration, which is completely fine. After these things are in place, we move into what we call the operational phase, where we begin with the FSVP assessment. Usually as part of that, that might flag up issues with the label, because we ask for the label as part of this assessment. And it also may flag up US legal claims assessments. Bill will talk about that a little bit later on. But clearly, if your label is good and you don't have any claims issues that need to be looked at in the US market, then you can jump straight from assessment into FSVP agent service. And that's where we're looking at prior notice, shipments, and ongoing safety monitoring. So finally, after 3 years, or if something changes regarding your product, maybe a major supplier has changed, maybe the process has changed, or the ingredients have changed, do a reassessment on the product at that point. Generally, we would do that for half the cost of the original assessment, because we already have most of the information, if not all. Okay, so one other point to make here is that at any time through this process, the FDA may inspect us on behalf of the US, and they also may inspect you. Because when you sign up to be FDA registered, one of the checkboxes you need to do in the signature there is to agree to an FDA inspection at any time. Now, interestingly, with the coronavirus going on right now, FDA and many other certification bodies and food safety standards have suspended foreign and domestic inspections right now. So what's interesting about that is that they're much more likely to be relying on electronic records and electronically verified records in the next 6 months to 12 months as this crisis plays out. So just bear that in mind, because that's a key way in which we can help, because everything we do is electronic, and that means that we can help manage that process, prevent any problems from occurring because of that. Okay, so the rest of these slides kind of go into a bit more detail on these things. I'm not going to read these out line by line, but you can get the idea here around what is required. You can read these later when we provide you with the slides and so on. Okay. So the people involved at US Import Agent is Leonardo. He is our CEO and founder. He is a PCQI. That means he is a qualified preventive controls qualified individual, and he's also FSVP certified. I myself am a food safety expert for well over 25 years, and I'm also a PCQI certified consultant. Jennifer, who's not with us today, and Andy, who are not with us today, they're some of our senior team. Jennifer has got over 20 years in food retail, supplier compliance. Andy, 30 years experience in food supply chain auditing with global companies as well. And then, of course, Bill's not on this slide. Bill is our legal guy on this side of things. So, key part about some other aspects, we have a global network of preventive qualified individuals. So it's not necessarily us that do all the work. We've got dozens of people everywhere, including in South Africa, who can help with food safety training, auditing, labs, all of that kind of thing. So we've got an extensive network in South Africa for that, and throughout the United States and Europe as well on many other areas. And there's multilingual capabilities in there as well. One of the things that we can do is, if you need help with your FSVP or your food safety plan or anything like that, we can provide local people to come in and see you rather than jumping on a plane and polluting the planet and spreading the coronavirus, so to speak. Other things that we do, as I mentioned earlier, we will liaise directly with FDA on your behalf on any import refusals and detentions that may occur. And these happen much more frequently than you might imagine. Routinely, we'll stop a product, inspect a certain aspect of that product, and wait until they get the correct response before they release the product. So we don't want these problems happening. So you want to have everything at your fingertips as and when that occurs. And all of this, by the way, applies to trade shows as much as it does for real imports. Clearly, the risk is less at a trade show, but it's still part of the law that if you bring product into the United States, it has to be compliant. So Bill's going to talk a bit more about the label review, so I'm going to leave this for him. And he's also going to talk a bit more about the import permit service as well, so we'll leave that to him as well. I mentioned this a bit earlier, and we spoke about this last year as well. We are absolutely stand ready to help you with being ready to trade in the United States. So if you want to arrange groupage to share shipping costs, for example, if you want to have US-based sample stock storage so that we can get rapid delivery of compliant product to your potential customer, then do get in touch with us, discuss that with us, and we can certainly set that up for you. Okay, so just in summary, US Import Agent has a highly experienced FDA compliance team. We provide comprehensive services around these areas, and our cloud platform really helps us keep costs down and ensure that we can tap into a global network of food safety professionals to help with all of this work, and so on. So please put any questions into the Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer those at the end, along with Leo and Bill. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Bill.
Thanks for having me, James. I've been looking forward to talking to everybody here, and I'm especially looking forward to you guys' questions. I'm going to go over the basics of FDA's laws, mostly related to labeling. And the reason we're talking a lot about labeling, you can run into problems with FDA, especially at the import level. I recognize I'm not going to be able to give you everything that you need to get this done today, and there'll be a lot of questions, and I'm looking forward to taking those. The basis of FDA food law, the main U.S. law that we have to consider is the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. That's called the FDCA. And there's additional amendment acts like the FPLA and the NHELA and a whole bunch of other acronyms. But at the end of the day, the thing that we have to be most concerned about, and what is really the real law, is FDA regulations, policy, and practice. And that's sort of where U.S. Import Agent and where I shine. That is understanding exactly how FDA actually exercises its authority. So what is the basic food law? When you're faced with FDA, whether it's at the port or whether they're inspecting you, they have two main concerns. And those concerns are, is the product adulterated? And is the product misbranded? So adulteration, and you're going to see this in any documents you see from FDA, is adulteration means that it's not adulterated, means that it's safe or wholesome. Now, if FDA charges you as adulterated, this has to do with your food safety plan or their testing at the ports. Not misbranded pertains to labeling. Misbranded is just the name of the charge that FDA gives when they think that you have a problem in your labeling. Why is labeling important? The most important thing that you need to know about labeling in the context of bringing product into the United States, when a product comes into the United States, the first thing that they do is ask for the label. FDA wants to see your label. And all they have to do is find one little appearance of a violation, and they can detain your product. So that's really critical for anybody who's bringing product to the United States. And we can come back to the enforcement policies, but the process that James' team puts together, and I'm involved in as well, is pretty comprehensive. First of all, we want to know what your product is. We're going to go over your ingredients. We're going to go over your specs and the kind of lab data you're going to need to have a compliant label. And then beyond that is a comprehensive review of the label, and that includes all of the elements of the label, all of the required and all of the recommended changes that you need to make. And then finally, there's going to be a re-review where we verify that the label has been changed as is needed to comply with FDA. Next. Okay, this is just an outline of the basics of labeling. The main things, the main categories, we're just going to say are the PDP, the Principal Display Panel, the Information Panel, and then claims import issues. So the PDP is just, think of it as the front of the package. You can see the graphics here. Now, a product can actually have more than one PDP. So if you have a box, you can often have 3 or more PDPs. Any side that can be the front on the shelf at a store can be a PDP. And so each PDP has to comply with the basic elements here. And that is statement of identity. The statement of identity is the thing, it's the name of the product. It's not the brand, it's the rice. So if you look at the identity on the left, it says any brand and rice. Rice is the statement of identity. You can call it whatever you want for branding, but ultimately the statement of identity is what the thing is. And there are a lot of FDA rules related to how you can explain the name of your product, how you can describe it, the characterizing flavor. That can be a really complicated issue. Standardized foods, you may not be aware, a lot of people are not, is that there are foods that FDA requires particular formulations and particular naming conventions. In addition, there are also requirements related to high value ingredients. So if your product contains something of high value that consumers would choose to buy or not buy based on its presence or its absence, then you have to designate that in the statement of identity. The net quantity is a simple declaration about how much is in the package. And that's not the weight of the package, it's the weight of the substance in the package. And that has to be declared in metric as well as US abstruse avoirdupois declarations, which are basically pounds and gallons in subdivisions for liquids. But you have to get that right, and there are a whole bunch of regulations related to the size of the font and the placement of the declarations. The information panel is the panel to the immediate right of any PDP. So you only have to have one. In fact, you can only have one really information panel unless you're appealing to an exemption. And the information panel has some of the most interesting and important parts of the label. Most important of these and most widely talked about is the nutrition facts panel. I believe it was in 2016. They created a new panel, and then it's become mandatory in the United States starting this year. If you look at the original and the old, the old format or the original format and the new format, if you want to know whether you have the new format, you'll note that the only significant difference in terms of visuals is that the calories needs to be large, and that will enable you to eyeball a panel and see whether it's in the new format or old. There's also been changes in the serving size. There's been changes in which vitamins and minerals are declared. And we can help you with all of those. The ingredient list. Ingredient list is really important before and after you create the label. Before you create the label, you have a concern about the safety of the ingredient. So FDA publishes some guidance on ingredient safety, but a lot of ingredients, you have to have a lot of background knowledge to know whether they're safe. The legal standard is that the ingredient needs to be GRAS, generally recognized as safe, or be a subject of a food additive petition. And the other thing after the fact is, one, you have to declare them by their common or usual name. Well, that's fairly simple, and in descending order of predominance. But the thing that you really need to know about, and that you always need to be concerned about before you ship anything into the United States, is that you have your major food allergen declarations correct. And the reason that's so critically important, beyond the very important, obvious reason that someone could be harmed if you don't declare them, it's that FDA, even if nobody's harmed, FDA can cause you to do a recall. This is the only labeling requirement that can lead to an FDA recall. And an FDA recall means that you're going to have to claw back every product from the market, contact all of your distributors, and possibly all the way down to the retail level sending letters. It also includes a public a press release detailing the product. And this can be harmful to your brand, relationships with distributors. Finally, on the information panel, you need to have a name and address declaration. That's the name and address to the principal place of business, and that declaration needs to announce the relationship of that named party to the goods. I want to note before we go on to the next slide, country of origin marking. Country of origin marking is critical. It can stop you at the port at any time because this is a creature of U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, Border Protection, or just Customs. This actually has a large legal background, but generally speaking, if the product is made in one country, it's fairly straightforward. If it's not, then there needs to be some research. But the point is, it has to be on the label, and if it's not, they're going to stop it at customs. Here's the side-by-side comparison of the nutrition facts panels. The old one's on the left, the new one is on the right. The main changes, I noted the calories declaration change. They've now traded out mandatory vitamin declarations for vitamin A and vitamin C are now swapped with vitamin D and potassium. Also, the bars and arrangements are different, but most importantly, and I think this is something people miss, and this is true for all nutrition facts panels, even whether you're in the old or new, is the serving size. Serving size is going to control all of your declarations and your quantities. And FDA's changed them. So even if you had the right serving size in the past, you may have a new serving size, which is going to adjust your nutrient declarations, but it's also going to adjust possibly your claims. Claims is the #1 risk element, both at the port and legally in general. So let me explain. So beyond FDA, all of your claims and advertising is regulated in the United States by an entity called the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission has jurisdiction over any advertisements for foods, drugs, cosmetics, basically anything that FDA regulates. And they have a singular requirement, and that is that your claims be true, not misleading, and adequately substantiated. And the upshot of that is, beyond obviously ways in which you could be misleading with the claims, which, you know, marketing folks have an idea about what they want to do, but compliance folks have another one. So that's the room around misleading. But the truthfulness of the claim is not, it has to be substantiated with actual scientific data. So if you make any kind of claim substantively about an effect on the body, FTC can come to you and demand that you provide scientific evidence. We're talking about human clinical trials or significant studies demonstrating that you have that effect, that the food has that effect. So that's the first level. And the difference with FDA and FTC is that FTC has the power to come after you for money. FDA can take your product away, they can lock you out of the market, they can do a lot of things, but they're not coming for your money. FTC gets large judgments against companies. So that's one thing you need to be aware of. Initially, FDA is very concerned with nutrient content claims. Nutrient content claims are merely, as you can see them on the left, claims about how much of a nutrient is in a food, whether it's less or low, like people want to avoid fat, or high, like high fiber or high protein or high vitamins. Those claims are regulated by multiple regulations, and they can't just be thrown onto the label. FDA is also concerned with, and this is a major issue for dietary supplements, but it also affects foods, is it structure function versus disease claims. And this may sound strange, but FDA regulates products based on their intended use. So food is the simplest of all the definitions. It's just defined as something intended to be used as food. However, drugs are anything that's intended to affect the structure or function of the body other than food, or claiming something that's intended to treat disease, prevent disease, or otherwise replace a drug. And oftentimes clients of mine have gotten into trouble for making claims that appeal to disease. And so if they claim that their product can, say, help with rickets or help prevent some disease or another by eating this food, FDA will regulate that product as a drug, and you will not be able to bring it into the country. Import issues. FDA has the power at the port to detain any product that just appears to violate the law. This is why labeling is so important. If you have something that's on there that's just fishy, and they think it might violate the law, they can detain your product and say that it violates. And you're set with the advantage or the disadvantage of having to disprove that. And that presents a major disadvantage for importers over US domestic companies because FDA gets to look at every shipment if they want to. And all it takes is a compliance officer at the port to ask for a copy of your label. He finds one problem with it, and if it's a problem that you can't fix, or he's not mistaken and we can't relabel it, then your product is not coming in. This is really important, especially for non-US products, to get their labeling right before they try to get into the country. There are a lot of other considerations beyond simple labeling. A lot of this stuff on here is labeling, but it's not all FDA. And a lot of it relates to your legal compliance in the US and legal liability and other detail. Natural claims, organic claims, and non-GMO claims. These are often clumped together in a lot of products, and these are critical claims and from marketing to the health food industry and to healthy-minded consumers. The difficulty with these claims is that they're wrought with legal problems. So you have to know what you're doing when you get into it. A natural claim, generally speaking, is not defined by FDA law. In fact, FDA has been brought into many lawsuits over the claim natural and has declined to give an answer as what it is. So the general policy is that you can't call anything natural if it has synthetic ingredients, added colors, or anything like a chemical preservative. But then there's many lawsuits on that issue. So you need to have advice on how to handle natural claims. Organic certification. A lot of products in the market are organic. The problem with organic certification is the long process, and it has many rules. And so you have to understand how to get certified and how to get your importer to work with you on the certification and on USDA's third-party certifiers. Finally, non-GMO claims. These claims are regulated for FDA products by the US Department of Agriculture. It's very strange, but USDA is exempted itself, but does require FDA products to follow non-GMA rules. The primary rule there is very simple. It's just you have to have a certain level or you can't have it. And the labeling is not terribly mandatory, but the difficulty is that can lead to lawsuits. So even though the enforcement powers by USDA are small, your relationship with your suppliers or your distributors and your relationship with the retailers and your relationship with product liability lawyers can be compromised by not getting this right. Prop 65. Prop 65 is a California rule. And in California, you're required to declare the presence of any chemical known by the state of California to cause birth defects or cancer on any label. So if you have the substance in your product, you have to declare pretty unattractive and explicit warning about the negative effect on hormones, reproduction, or cancer. And you'll see this in a lot of places. I'm from California. I've lived in California most of my life. And this area of law is extremely dangerous because there's a lot of lawsuits over it. Now, a lot of companies think that they're going to get away or around this by marketing outside of California. But California is the largest market in the United States. And so most distributors work across state lines. If your product finds its way into California, you're going to have to deal with Prop 65. And I can guarantee you, if your product is in Walmart or Amazon, that's going to be part of the vetting process to getting onto the shelf. So understanding Prop 65 and what ingredients to avoid and whether or not you have to use the label is critical. James talked earlier, and I'll talk just very briefly about this, that there are certain permits for certain kinds of food. APHIS is the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service part of USDA. That's the US Department of Agriculture. They require permits for products that have animal origin ingredients from countries that might have certain diseases in their livestock or in the animal population. So, for instance, a lot of countries will have to have a permit if a product has egg product in it because of avian flu or something like that. And this sort of highlights the situation we're in now. But we'll just leave it to that. There are permits for certain kinds of products with animal ingredients as well as certain plant ingredients known to have pests in them. Finally, and I want to leave you with this, is important. Alcohol is a food, and it is technically partially regulated by FDA. But under a memorandum of agreement, it's also regulated and primarily regulated by an agency called TTB, or the Tax Trade Bureau. And that they regulate wine, spirits, and malt beverages. And just to be very brief there, in short, to sell wine, spirits, or beverages in the United States, you have to have the proper permit. You have to have proper labeling. You have to have it approved under what's called a COLA formula if it's different than any standard formulas. And we can help you with all of these things. I know we just scratched the surface today. Really, this is going to create as many questions as it did answers, but I think you have a framework about the kinds of things you need to be looking out for, kinds of ways that we can help you. I'll say this in the summary. FDA compliance is complex, and a label review will reveal the problems that you have in almost all of these areas. Our team, we require close collaboration with our team. You're going to have access to experts in labeling that have been doing this for decades, and even lawyers when that's necessary. Our staff is expert, and James put together the best people in the business. And you can even get a hold of an attorney if you need one like me.
Okay, I think that's us. Well done, Bill. Thank you very much under challenging audio conditions. So let's get on to the Q&A section. For this, I'm going to open up the audio to Leonardo.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Leo. Could you just introduce yourself, Leo, and I will go and add in Healthy Costs and Bing as well.
Yes, I'm the president and the CEO of the US Import Agent, FSVP, and PCQI certified. So we started this company to help the foreign company, to bring their product in the United States. We have more of 3 years because the FSMA became law in 2017. So we started to work in this field immediately, and we help a lot of foreign company from Europe around in the world. So we have a lot of experience. We start immediately, and I think we can be very helpful for the company who wants to start business in the United States. So there is some question for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got some questions. So let me run through some of those just now. I'm still trying to locate Bing if she wants to join in on this, but I will start at some questions here. I'm just going to say the first name and the question. So 1 second. So I've got a question here about from Linda, asking. Reading about how we cannot renew our biennial registration with FDA without a DUNS number. I think she must be mentioning any information on this. I haven't heard anything about this before. Yes, so in order to register with FDA, you have to have a DUNS number. That DUNS number is free. You can get that at the Dun & Bradstreet website, and just search for Dun & Bradstreet DUNS number in your web browser, and you should be able to get that. It's almost instant. You need that number to be able to register with FDA. And the biennial registration, just to make a note on that point, it's every 2nd year in, I think it's the December of
Yes, this is December. All of the food facility registration will expire. They have to renew the BIAN certification. So all the company can change if they already have a US agent in charge for the food facility registration, if they found a company better price to put in charge another US import agent. So in December, all the company have to have a new or renew US import agent for the food facility registration.
But just to clarify one point on that, Leonardo,
yes,
you can actually log in to your FDA registration at any time and change who your FSVP agent is. You're not stuck. You're not stuck with someone for 2 years if you don't want to be. So it's just a matter of the public
you
record.
can change immediately. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So Linda,
you cannot do an update, and so you put all the information about the new US agent in charge.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. I hope that answers your question, Linda. Right, so I've got another question here from Yemi. So Yemi's asking, Bill, can you please repeat what the only requirement is that can lead to a recall on labeling again? So I kind of missed that one because I thought there was more than one, but yeah, if you want to explain that one because you're the expert. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. This is the only one that's going to be a recall every time. There could be some others that could lead to a recall, but it's major food allergens. Major food allergens is a serious recall, and FDA will not let you around it, and they will come after you. Major food allergens include eggs, milk, fish, crustacean shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, and soybeans. So if they're not declared properly in the ingredient list or in an allergen statement below the ingredient list, that will stop your product. It may not stop it at entry if FDA misses it, but if they find it, it's going to lead to a recall.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bill. And just to add to that point, what you put on the label is only part of the story. So I'll give you an example. So during our food safety assessments, we ask you not only what is in the product, so we will verify through the ingredients that you provide what is actually declared as being in the product, and we will assess that against the US allergen list, the United States allergen list, which may be different from I think it is different from your allergen list. And these are the kind of problems you need to think about. But beyond that, you also need to consider what other allergens you handle on site and store, and how you store them, and also whether the other allergens that you have are used in the same equipment, on the same production line, and so on. So it's not just about what's in the product, it's about what else you have on the premises, how that's stored, and whether you use that on the production line, because these are the subtleties which need to be checked on your label. For example, may contain, or produced in a facility that also handles peanuts or tree nuts or whatever. So there are some additional things that you need to consider, because you might have your label technically accurate, but if a test is done or a sample is taken to test for allergens, you might get found out on that and find yourself with an import alert slapped on you. So these are just some additional considerations. So another question from Gaurav. So this question is about brand and trademark registration. So I guess Bill is the best person to answer this one. So is this a requirement before the South African company exports? And in addition, well, this may be a separate one. I'll come to Leo on the second one. So Bill, if you could answer this requirement around brand and trademark registration searches and so on.
Yeah, there's no pre-market requirement to do or even have a trademark. What you want is to have the trademark as soon as possible so that you get protection. So if the concern is actually the opposite, that you get a trademark and then you don't bring it to market. So what you want is to get the trademark as early as possible, but it won't be effective until you bring it to market. So I hope that answers your question. What you want to do is get that trademark as soon as possible and get in the market as soon as possible.
Okay.
There is no requirement to have one.
Okay, perfect. Good. So I've also added Golden and Koss onto the call. So if there's anything that you guys want to add about any of these things, then please do. I've got an additional question from Gaurav, which is asking, he would like to understand, to assist with value chain costing, what retail distributor import agent margins, costs and costs are, indicative, of course, for specialty foods. Leo, could you perhaps chime in on this one?
Depend on the product. We have with us Cristiano. Maybe I don't know if Cristiano is more experience, but usually depend on the product. Usually the importer, they put a, it's really linked with the product, because the olive oil, for example, is a product, there is a lot of competition. You cannot put a lot of margin on top. So we need to know, we don't do this kind of trade market. So we have a partner like Bravo International, and Cristiano is with us. Maria, we did the presentation last October. But if we can know, maybe the product, I can tell you what kind of percentage usually and what kind of store. If you go to like ShopRite, it's a different story. If you go to a small store where American group, they have only 20 or 10 stores, it's different. So it's really related with where you will sell your product.
Well, Leonardo, if you want, I can jump in quickly.
Okay. Yeah,
Go
okay,
ahead, Cristiano.
perfect, Cristiano.
If it's not a problem. James,
Introduce,
okay.
no, I don't know. Okay, introduce yourself. I'm happy.
Well, yeah, I'm Cristiano Villani. I'm the president and CEO of Bravo International. Bravo International is a consulting and management company that help foreign company to bring business in the United States. It's very short. What we're doing, we try to sell the product. So regarding the question of the margin, this is quite complex, as Leonardo said. There's a different situation. Generally speaking, just for the specialty product, the retail have a margin, want to have a margin between 35–40%. If it's a unique product, then we can also have some store that there's some retailer that want to have 50%, but it's not really usual. It is something that is very general, because if you think about Costco, that is a different product, retail chain that is a club store, they work with 12%. So that is just for the part of the retailer. Regarding the distributor and importer, so the distributor, generally speaking, they're working between 25–30%, but as Leonardo mentioned, several of them are national distributors that have a different agreement with different supermarket retail chains. So we can have, like, for example, UNFI, that is a national distributor working with Whole Food nationally with 8%. Wakefern, that is a distributor with ShopRite, is getting only 5%. And so far. So it's really, there's different scenario to have a look and take in consideration. The importer, if it's the importer is as well a distributor, again, then we usually get between 40% of margin on top. This is generally, again, I agree with Leonardo, in order to give you a better understanding and explanation, we need to have information about your strategy, where you want to sell your product and what kind of product it is. But generally speaking, if we're speaking about specialty, as I mentioned, this is the general information that I can share today now.
Thank you very much, Cristiano. Fantastic answer. Let me go to the next question here, which is, I can't see quite the name here, but the question is, do you offer any distribution services in addition to being an FSVP agent? So I'll hand to Leonardo for that. He's more experienced in these areas than I.
Yeah, and Cristiano more, because Cristiano is our partner to sell, because Cristiano, the main business of Cristiano is to help the company to build a brand in the United States, a distribution in all kind of circles. So he can help from the beginning to start, so to bring to the big American group or the small one store, like 20–40 stores around. In the beginning, maybe usually the strategy we do is we help in 2 states, New York and New Jersey, because to try to see if the product can be sold in the United States, you need to start with not a big investment to go nationally. Hello?
I'm good, thank you. Kevin, you're speaking to.
Okay. So, yeah, we can help to sell in United States too. And as before Cristiano said, if we have more information, what kind of a product you wanted to introduce on the market, we can give you suggestion and give you the different steps you need to do to get market in the United States. We can help you for everything, like warehousing, distribution, everything. We need more information to be more specific on your product, based on your product.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Leonardo. So a couple of other questions. One quick one for Bill. Are there any specific labeling requirements for wholesale shipments to the United States? For example, would nutritional value info be needed to be labeled on every barrel of our honey?
That's a great question. Probably the answer is no. FDA has a series of labeling exemptions for bulk products. So if the product is intended to be brought in to be repackaged, you can bring it in, and basically you're exempt from almost all of the labeling requirements if you meet the exemption. And if it's not going to be, the other component there is that you have to have a labeling agreement with the end party who's going to do the relabeling. But essentially, no. If it's bulk product that's going to be repackaged, you can, you're going to be exempt from most of the labeling requirements.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Bill. Hope that answers your question. That was Catherine. So Claudia, one question there. We already have 2 importers. They work with their own agents that we don't communicate with unless there is an emergency. For trade shows like Fancy Food Show and potential customers that are not importers or Amazon, can we use US import agent as our importer? Would you please share any costs for this representation? So US import agent, our business, I assume that's what you're referring to there. We only act as the food safety representative. So it takes away the responsibility for multiple importers to have to do that for you, or multiple distributors and so on. So we can certainly help introduce you to people in the supply chain, on distribution and so on, where that's required. We can look at that as a project and so on.
Cristiano do this kind of service with Bravo International, so we can help through Cristiano in this way to be the import of record, because the importer is the import of record, and the US import agent or the consulting company can be the FSVP agent. So it's 2 different positions. So yes, definitely we can help for that.
Okay, and one quick one following on from that, Leo, that you might want to jump in on here. It's also Claudia is mentioning, saying that we mentioned that we also offer the service of storage and delivery for a fee, thinking of Amazon or other small online retailers. Can you say a quick word about that, please?
Yes, we can usually in United States, the company to start a business, they usually use a public warehouse. What means you pay a monthly fee per pallet, so they can deliver it for you, or you can have a chance to send your importer or store, your clients in United States to get the product from there. We have around the United States some agreement with different company. They do warehousing service. So it's almost 15 years we work around here, New Jersey, New York, but California, Florida too. So if we know, because usually how they work, if you have 10 pallets, they will apply you a fee. If you just want to send 2 pallets, the fee will change little bit. So yes, we can provide a estimate about if you will send an email and you can explain as I think I need per year to send 3 pallets so I can have on the US territory, so I can push my people, sell my product, or my clients can go there, or you, US import agent, through Cristiano, through US import agent, help me to sell my product. Because one of the most important when you want to sell in the United States is you need to have the product on the US territory, because if you have a chance during the show, somebody is interested to your product, they cannot wait you to go back, or the product come from South Africa, for example, because it's important when the buyer go to the show and speak with the companies, the first company can bring to his office the sample, he start to see that company has very efficient, very serious, already he have some product on the territory. All these steps it's important for all the company wants. And it's not a big investment because the fee for the pallet is around, for not frozen product, around $30–40 per month, just to have in storage. After they will charge, if I remember well, $16 out, $6 in to move the pallet. Some warehousing company give the service to move cases, like 50 cents per case if your clients or your person in charge to move your product, to sell your product, go there to get the product from the warehouse. So we can, if you will send an email, we can provide you a accurate estimate for how fit for your need, you know, for what you think you wanted to do in the United States.
Okay, thank you for that, Leo. I've got one here for either Kos or Golden. This one is from Gaurav. As a first-time entrant into the market, can we get insight on promotional spend, for example, slotting fees, broker fees, advertising spend? So who wants to pick that one up, Kos or Golden?
Hi, James.
Hi, Kos.
Sorry, can you repeat that question? I didn't quite get it.
Yeah. So the question that's being asked is, which looks like it's kind of out of scope of what we do. So I'm just kind of batting it over the over the fence to you. As a first-time entrant into the market in the US, can we get insight on promotional spend? I don't know if that means help with promotional spend or insight on promotional spend or expectations on slotting fee, broker fees, and advertising spend. So I guess that it's aiming at, is there support for these things?
Right. My understanding from that, it's an indication of how much it would cost to do a product promotion in store in the US. I wouldn't have that, but probably Bing could attend to that. Yes, Bing could attend to that.
Yes, but James, I wanted to, maybe Cristiano can spend, because I saw some message ask me if we can be the importer. Yes, we can act as importer for the company, South Africa company. So we will found the question, but Cristiano on this point is can give all kind the details after Maria, if Maria wants to say something on that, but I think Cristiano can be more specific on that question. But
okay, let's see if Maria can add something
yes.
to that, and then we'll go to Cristiano. Maria?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I think Cristiano can talk more about the practicality of, in terms of whether the promotional costs for a foreign supplier to work with a U.S. importer if they've already appointed one. And of course, that goes on with the distributor and the retailer that they're working with. But just before we go to that portion, for South African companies, as you know, the DTI has a program called EMEA, which is the Export Marketing Investment Assistance Program. And what it is they subsidize some of the marketing efforts on a national level for companies, but also individually. So that's one thing that I think we'll talk to you more, but also you can find out more information through the DTI. So the DTI is a division called Trade Investment South Africa. What they do more is really the export marketing side, which is what the EMEA scheme is meant to do. And you get that information on the DTI website. But what it does is they assist individual companies and groups, companies, even consortium. And within that, there are programs, whether it's exhibiting individually overseas, doing primary market research, trade missions. This is group missions, and also national pavilions. So there are different levels that the Department of Trade and Industry of South Africa actually assists South African companies. And more often than not, we realize that there are South African companies that are not aware of it. Um, we only they only find out when they meet with us here, or they through through their interest in exporting, then they suddenly discover about that. But USAID, we partner with them because one of the things that they do is promote bilateral trade. And so some of the work, particularly the fancy food show, some of the companies, particularly the South African companies, can actually apply for assistance. And this is part of their marketing assistance to South African exporters. We can discuss that more at a later stage, but as you can see, there are projects that are already set in place by the market managers, whether it's for the US, the UK, and or Europe and Asia and all that. And you have the list of national pavilions, but companies can also apply individually, and you can find that under EMEA, which is individual offerings. Now, they don't subsidize everything, but to a certain extent, the more generous ones are actually the national pavilion programs. But there is also in-store promotions. In-store promotions can be done whether as special projects or in groups. So if you're working with a retailer and you want to bring a group of South African companies, there's a couple of you that want to participate in that in-store promotion. You can talk to the foreign economic office, like our office. If it's something particular to the U.S., we can look at it and channel you to the right um, office of the DTI that they can manage that, and also request for funding to assist with such an in-store promotion. But we don't we do that on a case-to-case basis and project-to-project basis.
Thank you very much for that, Maria. Excellent information there. Cristiano, would you like to add anything to that? Are you still on mute?
Cristiano, you are there?
James?
Yes.
Okay, maybe.
Yes, it's Golden here.
Hi, Golden.
I'm just wondering whether some of the participants have got questions to do with export, but that have not been covered in the subject matter you covered today, and whether we can actually just make an invitation to people to indicate what else would they like to know, so that if we are thinking of future webinars, we would know the topics that they're interested in.
Of course, yeah. Well, you've said it already. So yeah, if there's anything that you would like us to cover, we're more than happy to do more of these webinars further down the line. I'm already thinking that after this webinar, when we send out the link to the video and the slides, that we can also send you a web form that you can complete to tell us what else you would like us to present on and information. And perhaps we can invite other experts along to future webinars who can shed light on some of those areas if we are not the right people for that. So we're more than happy to facilitate that. But if you do have any other ones, then I would say that the best way to do that is to bring or to respond to the email that we send, and we'll cover some of those. So Cristiano is now unmuted. Thanks for that, Golden. Cristiano is now unmuted. Go ahead, Cristiano.
Okay, so just
you need to speak up. We can't hear you, or put the microphone closer to your mouth. Very faint.
Okay, so try to do my best. Yeah, try to also.
It's a little bit better if you can bring the microphone closer.
I have.
Okay.
My closer, very
yep,
close.
That's better.
Okay, very shortly, the question that was regarding slotting and trade and marketing promotion activity is a big step to be here. There's a lot of argument, different situation, but generally speaking, yes, you have to pay slotting. The game is to pay slotting through the different supermarket, but the other important thing is that several times you need to work with the distributor, and also the distributor are asking also themselves a certain kind of free filling or slotting as well. So the rate is different based on the category of your product. If you're a specialty product, you have a mass market product, there are different costs related to this, like a slotting there. Sometimes if you're a specialty, you can also have only to pay the free filling the distributor that is only 1 or 2 cases per store. Generally speaking, we have example that for product is certain supermarket, certain retail, they ask you uh, 10,000, 15,000 or more for that. Again, it's depend on the category, because if your specialty network product are completely different. But definitely, yes, you have to pay slotting in this market. You have to have in your business plan an amount to make this kind of investment. Regarding the broker, is roughly a must to work with. Yes, broker is they are very important because they are strictly connected to the supermarket. And again, we are speaking about the business that are looking for the big supermarket here, the retail chain. Okay, is something different if you're thinking about specialty store or the other. The good things of this market is you have so many channels of sales, and you can choose the time in which you want to be there, obviously based on your strategic plan. But generally speaking, broker is a must. Roughly, yes, because they have direct connection with the buyer. And exactly, and one very important thing, the time in which you think to be on the supermarket, you need to take in consideration that there's several steps, including the setup. Setuping is really very difficult and is not easy to do it. So you have to take in consideration that broker is very helpful in this situation. They help you to set up in the right time, in the right way. Generally speaking, the cost of a broker, if there are, sometimes there's someone that can ask for a retainer, a monthly retainer. Generally speaking, the range is between 3-5%. Again, it depends of the category, but generally speaking, we're speaking about this rate. Um, Trade marketing activity is huge in a supermarket. You have to pay AD monthly or quarterly. You have to offer a promotional program. That is generally what you have to do. So again, this is something that is depend of the strategic plan and what are you doing. So this is something that obviously this is our job, so we can explain you in detail. But just to give you this as an answer for your question. So you have slotting, yes, 2 levels of slotting. One is cash by the certain supermarket. The other one is coming from the distributor, that is mainly by product. Broker, yes, if you want to work with the supermarket, you need to have a broker. You need to have in place a broker network, and the cost is between 5%, 3-5%. If not, there's a retainer. Trade marketing activity, yeah, there's a lot of activity. These supermarket are asking for several activity, and when you go to the presentation of your product, you must be prepared and have a program in place. The last things that if you think about supermarket, there's a category review. It means that it's going to happen 1-2 times per year per product. So this is very important. So you have to take in consideration that several times, if you miss an opportunity, the next time will be the next year. So this is also because it's very important to take in consideration that a United States project here need to have a view at least at 3-5 years. I don't know if you answer to all the question that was done.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you very much, Cristiano. That's very, very useful information, I think, for the audience. So a couple of questions I'm going to quickly run through from our side, just to fast forward through some of these, because there's still quite a few questions to get through. So one of them is from Subasan. If US import agent is the FSVP agent and a consignment is refused by FDA due to a label requirement, does US import agent take on the liability because they would have done a label assessment before the goods were produced and shipped? The short answer is no. Well, obviously we can't be, we can't actually take on liability. We're doing a job as a professional for you. We've got qualified individuals doing that work. Errors could happen for any kind of reason. For example, the correct information was not provided to us or whatever, but we will do our absolute level professional best to get the label compliant for you. and where necessary, we will engage people like Bill to take a double look at that. In addition to that, if FDA do have a problem, they will come to us first and ask us what we can do to resolve the situation. They're not there to be blockers. They're there to make sure the product is compliant. And as long as we can prove to them that it is compliant or make it compliant, then we can assist with getting that issue dealt with. Okay, next question I've got here. Is there a specific food safety certification that's more favored by US imports? And does that make your assessment more streamlined? Well, yes and no. The first point is that if a food company is certified, then it's a very good indicator that they've got standards in place, that they are being independently audited and checked and so on. And that's a good thing. That's always a good thing. It makes our job easier when we're doing the assessment, because we know that when we, for example, ask for the traceability and recall plan, that we're going to get one, rather than someone at the other end having to quickly make one up that they're not actually doing, which we see this stuff. So the best certifications out there are what we call GFSI benchmarked. That's the Global Food Safety Initiative, who are a kind of an umbrella assessment organization on global food standards. But in a nutshell, if you have got BRC, SQF, FSSC 22000, or ISO 22000, then generally you're good. That's on the food manufacturing side. You also have Global GAP, Canada GAP, and others on the produce side. So certification is very helpful. I've had conversations with FDA recently where some of the inspectors say we don't care about certification because certification isn't Food Safety Modernization Act or FSVP law. Some of the certification bodies like BRC and others have what they call FSMA modules in them, and if you're assessed to them, then that is even better because it makes sure that your food safety plans are compliant with the FSMA preventive controls rule. But again, if you've got any questions on that, do let me know, particularly, and Leonardo, and we can come back to you on that. So another one further on down here, can you share Cristiano's email address or details? Yes, definitely. On the email that we send out, we'll give you ways of getting in contact with all the experts on this panel. Question from Yemi. Hi, Leonardo. So I'm guessing this is about something you must have said earlier on around the import stuff. So this means that you guys at US Import Agent can, depending on the product, be importer and distributors. Do you want to say something a little bit about that? Because yeah, you want to obviously clarify that. Leonardo? Leonardo, are you there? Can't hear you. 1 second, let me check these here. Oh, he's muted for some reason. Leonardo, you need to unmute your microphone at your side.
Yes, okay. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so US Import Agent, it's a company to take care about the safety food. So for the company to bring their product in the United States to be in compliance, because we didn't say the foreign company have to be in compliance with preventive control for human food. You can be certified BRC, IFS, ISO, but it's not the FSMA regulation. So the FDA wants to add all the P's, usually are the preventive control and the GMP put in place. So is after that, US Import Agent take care about the foreign supplier verification program plan. It's not just to be a US agent like before for foreign, for food facility registration. So after that, we have a partner, and I have 10 years of, I was importer. I was importer distributor in the United States for olive oil and other kind of products. So definitely, yes, we have a relationship with people, sell, distributor in this country. Cristiano is one of our partner for that kind of part of business. So we can give you help. For example, one good idea for all the company from South Africa is we can figure out one container for all 2 months or 1 month, and all the company can booking one pallet. What means? Means one full container shipped from South Africa, maybe the cost from Tunisia, for example, was $1,800. So 10 pallet in 20 foot is around $200 per pallet. So if you will send one pallet from South Africa in groupage, your cost will be $1,000, $900, $1,010, because it's more expensive. So we can do a business plan to help all the company with Maria, Cost, the consulate, just to give you the chance to send 2 pallets in, to fill up one full container, and the cost will be just $200, $300 per pallet. After that, you can use through US import agent, will take care for you a public warehouse. So you don't have a huge cost. At the end, the cost will be per month, $50 rent per month per pallet, but you will build your chance to push on the market your product. The company, you can have US import agent, have salesman can be after check your product. They have to believe your product can get market in United States. Otherwise, you will spend money and they will spend time. If the product have a really good chance of potentially on the market, we will be happy to help you, because we have all the person to do everything, to sell, to give you a business plan, to go to the big circle. For example, Cristiano, he's selling ShopRite, all the big company, he sell the product from his clients from Italy, Europe, and North Africa too. So for us, when we see your product, we'll see your product and get there is an opportunity, we are the first to say, okay, I will give you a business plan, how you can push, what kind of result, a percentage of the result to sell in this country. So each kind of service, warehousing, distribution, importing, we can help you in detail after we can see and believe your product can get market. You know, it's really important, because in the United States, there is all kind of product already. So that means not another same product cannot be sold, but we know very well our circle where we already sell and the relationship with the buyer, with the broker. So in 2 weeks, just to have some meetings with our network, we can already touch if something we can build, or it's something it's more hard. It's your choice to not to proceed, but we will be very clear to tell you the potentially and how we can help you immediately. But again, all kind of the steps of the service we can provide today, or maybe yesterday and tomorrow. So all kind of maybe data you need, send an email if you have some specific question to some of that point. We are happy to give you all, to provide you all more information about it.
Excellent, thank you, Leo. Couple of other quick fire questions here. From Yemi, how is coronavirus directly impacting on importation of goods, if at all, especially with FDA of imported goods and wait times? Thanks, guys. So I can give you a bit of a sense of what I'm seeing, but I think we could be here a while discussing all of that. But we know that FDA has already said that they're not doing any foreign inspections during this kind of lockdown time. I myself am locked down, trapped in, not trapped, but I'm in Tenerife, can't get home at the moment because of flights, but thanks to the wonders of the internet, we can do this. So what I'm seeing amongst our customers is that more and more of them, and especially in manufacturing companies, they're working from home, and so on. So the reliance on digital connectivity going forward is absolutely key, and FDA are no different from that. The inspections themselves are still happening at the ports because this is an essential service. Food is an essential product, and what's really happening around food is the changing in demand. In the short term, that means that staples are more in demand, especially long shelf life ambient products are more in demand. But in time, that will relax a little bit. Obviously, the retail and hospitality sector, the hospitality sector is in real trouble at the moment because they're not selling anything, and the types of products which are going to them are actually starting to be repurposed into retail, because retail is seeing a 20–30% increase in sales because of lockdown and panic buying and these things. So these, I think, are all short-term impacts, and in the the coming months, we're going to see things change again. So I hope that answers some of your questions. But I think imported goods and wait times, as far as I'm aware, I'm not hearing anything that they are being directly affected at this point. But of course, it's extraordinary times that we're in at the moment, and that could change. So let's go on to a couple of other questions. Bing has made a comment to, can we invite Cristiano to give a presentation on US food distribution for the consulate, which I think is a great idea. Cristiano, I hope that you can make an arrangement with myself and Leo to arrange that sometime in the next month or 2 months. That would be fantastic, but we'll take that up with Cristiano. One other point that Golden made was that, yeah, Leo and I are very bad for just talking about South Africa, because we, in regular contact with Bing and the South African Consulate. I do wish to say that, of course, everything that we're talking about today applies to Zambia and Eswatini and all of the other countries in Africa, indeed all the countries in the world. So we're more than happy to work with companies all across Africa on helping to get into the US market. So I would like to get to a point where we are kind of winding up now. And again, if there are any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. One point I do want to make is that we will contact you afterwards regarding the new online supplier profile approved supplier program, if you like, for coming into the US and getting your products there. Leonardo has already sent out some questionnaires. If you could please fill them in, because we will use the information that you give us in those questionnaires as part of that project. This would be extremely useful. And whether Fancy Food Show may or may not go ahead, in either case, this is a good first positive step for getting some US exposure from a US import business through our partners and so on. Bing has also mentioned, can we please share the program we planned with the entire group? It arrives in New York for Fancy Food Show, market briefing, and so on. I take it, Bing, you're referring to the webinar and so on, that, yeah, if that's the case, absolutely, we can do that. What I would like to do now is, if I could hand back to Ohalfi to maybe do a little bit of a wind up, and then costs, and then we'll close the webinar down. And thank you so much for all of your attentions. We started with over 60, and we're now at just under 49 participants at the moment. So I think this shows that we've had a lot of really good content today. So I'll just unmute Ohalfi, and we will get to that point. Okay. Ohalfi, you're unmuted.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you so much for this insightful session. I believe our companies have gotten a bit of insight on what is expected of them in preparation for the show coming up in June. Just to echo the sentiments shared by Bing, I really would recommend that we also have like a follow-up session before the show starts. And this is part of the reason why in the program that we try and build is to make sure that before the show starts, the exhibitors have an opportunity to meet the consulate, but also engage again with US import agents. But I also would like to encourage that we do have another webinar to allow the companies to ask questions that they may have experienced along the way as they were preparing or beginning to make preparations for their products coming into the US. In addition, we also really encourage the idea of looking at leaving part of their supplies in the US, because our experience has been that a number of South African exhibitors have entered the country and found that their products were not able to be cleared on time for the show. In addition to that, it also is very costly for the products to be brought in later when there are potential buyers that are interested to sample the product or even just purchase it. So I think all the ideas that were presented this morning are really welcome. We stand ready as the consulate to assist wherever we can, whether it's directly with the exhibitors if they have additional questions, or if they want to continue being in contact with US import agents. That being said, thank you so much to the team from US Import Agents, Leonardo for connecting us and making this possible. Thank you, Cos, for listening to mine and Bing's madness when we said we should be doing this ahead of time so that we are better prepared for fancy food shows in June. On behalf of the consulate and the CG, I had been speaking to him, trying to get him to join us. As you might be aware, the COVID situation has us also a bit worked up with South Africans that are stuck in the US, so we're also tending to that. He was not able to join in, but I will keep him abreast of the discussions that were shared. Thank you so much. The exhibitors, thank you so much for availing your time and being present for this opportunity. And we look forward to meeting all of you.
Thank you, Alfie. I would like to pass on now to Golden, who will maybe sum up on behalf of the Hub.
Thank you very much, James. Firstly, a big thank you to you and your colleagues for lining up this very useful webinar and information that you have shared and the questions that you managed to answer. As you can tell from the questions, we have a very hungry audience that needs more. And we will certainly confer with you to line up future webinars so that we speak to the remaining issues that the exporters are interested to learn about. As a hub, we think that digital is the future. And we need to be doing a lot more. And I was very excited to learn about your cloud platform and how you can actually use that capability to help the exporters in terms of the screening, verification, all the way to the importation arrangements into the US, so to speak, the whole value chain for an exporter from cradle to customer, if you like. I think that's something that we'll be very interested to explore further, how we as a hub can facilitate the region's competitiveness, because we are really looking at coordination and collaboration amongst exporters for them to compete as a region, because we are competing against other regions. So how can we get Southern Africa into the US market on competitive terms? So that's something that we'll be following up on. I would also like to thank the South African Consulate in New York for being very proactive in terms of addressing private sector development issues. You are a valuable partner to us. I would also like to thank the Hub staff, cause and colleagues for making this happen. And lastly, I would also like to thank the private businesses, the exporters, for taking the time to join us on this webinar. We are willing to hear you and to follow up on your additional requirements for information. And our role as a hub is to support you in that regard. So thank you very much, everybody. Good night to those in Southern Africa, and enjoy your day in the US.
Thank you, Golden. And with that, just a final thanks to Bill, our legal partner on FDA compliance issues, and also for Cristiano for stepping in at the last moment to help with such valuable information on the distribution aspects. And we have now inspired the subject for the next webinar, I believe. So we'll be in discussion about that and be in touch, and you'll get some follow-up email in the coming days. So good luck, everyone, during these quite extraordinary times. I hope you innovate and stay safe. And thank you very much, everyone, again.